Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the HockeyDebates.com podcast. Today, as we do every Thursday, it's This Week in NHL Betting. I'm joined by Sasha Peruk, the head odds maker at sportsbettingdime.com, and esteemed hockey writer and Hall of Famer Kevin Allen. And I think, Kevin, we got to start out by bowing in reverence to Sasha. He boldly predicted the Edmonton Oilers would fall like a rock, and that's exactly what they're doing. I was just looking up their numbers. They're 2-4 in their last six. They were 4-8-1 in December. They had 9 games in December where they scored 2 goals or fewer. They had 6 games in December where they allowed 5 or more goals. So, Sasha, it looks like you know what you're talking about.
I get lucky every so often.
I don't think they're dead yet, though, Sasha. I expect that there'll be some tinkering done here in the not so distant future, and I think they're one of the teams. If you listen to the drumbeat, that's looking to make a move because I think they feel like they've got enough to believe that if they make a trade or two, they could be an effective playoff team. And for most teams that are still building, it's not absolutely crucial that you make the playoffs, but I think it is for the Oilers. Like I think for the fan base there, they need to get in to see what Connor McDavid and Draisaitl can do in the playoffs. So I really think they're a team that if Holland is going to do for that franchise what it needs, I think he's going to go out and make a couple moves.
Yeah,
one thing they have going for them, you talk about strength of schedule a lot in the NFL. You don't hear it as much in the NHL, but about half of their remaining 40 games are against teams that are behind them in the standings. So technically they've got a schedule that should be favorable to success.
Yeah, certainly playing in the Pacific gives their odds of reaching the playoffs a boost. It is, for my money, the weakest division in the NHL. I don't think that my hometown Vancouver Canucks are going to keep up their relevant streak here. So if I was looking for a reason to back the Oilers, I still don't really have a very good one. It would be that strength of schedule, strength of division, or lack thereof for the Pacific.
And you talk about them making the move, Kevin. I guess, first of all, you look at the goals when we say they've scored 2 or fewer in 9 games in the past month. I mean, that seems to show if Draisaitl and McDavid aren't doing it, nobody's doing it. And you think you talk about a move, would Kenny Holland try to tap into his old team there, the Red Wings, maybe try to pick up some not that they have a lot of offensive help to offer, but Andreas Athanasiou, if he was healthy, would be an intriguing option.
Well, when it comes to offense, that would be like the poor robbing, the poor. I mean, and there's really not much that could help. I would wonder if Holland would be interested in Anthony Ciu. He's hurt now, but depending on what his injury is, but he probably he had to deal with him too with regard to salary, so maybe that wouldn't be a good fit. But there are some interesting offensive people out there. Kreider, obviously, although the Rangers have not committed, from what I can tell, yet to moving him. But Hoffman is another guy that I think will be moved, and there are some guys that I think could help. But the problem with the Oilers is usually you're sort of waiting for that secondary scoring to kind of kick in or to get hot, but it's really not there for the Oilers. They don't really have a group down there that can chip in. So Draisaitl and Connor McDavid got to play at such an elite level, and then you've got to just hope that you can kind of score by committees. I don't. Other than Nugent Hopkins, they don't have anybody down there that I'd say, boy, he could sort of lift them up and sort of lead the secondary charge. So, Holland has his work cut out for him. I don't think they're in a position to contend, not even close. But I do think because of the way the Pacific is structured, I think they can get into the playoffs. And I think that's really what you need to do with this franchise. You got to sort of give them the fans, I think, a sort of taste of what it could be like when they, do build a team top to bottom.
I was looking at the worst minuses in the NHL the other day because I have that kind of time, and one name that kind of jumped out on off the page at me. I mean, it was pretty much a list dominated by Detroit Red Wings and New Jersey Devils, and then right in the middle of the pack, there's James Neal. Here's a guy that the Oilers were so excited about. Edmonton fans were so thrilled when he was scoring all those goals, but he's one of the worst minuses in the NHL, and he's not on a horrible team. Well, obviously, he's doing most of his damage on the power play. Is he a guy that they could look at, Sasha, as possibly being? He's certainly got a reputation as a goal scorer, but is he a guy that can still score 5-on-5?
I don't see it. And it's one of the huge reasons why I was waiting the Oilers to start with this, because their 5-on-5 numbers, their shot metrics, their possession metrics are just terrible outside of when McDavid and Draisaitl are on the ice. And I agree with Kevin. Like, I like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins as a secondary center, but ideally sort of like a third-line center, because he is incredibly defensively responsible, and he has a lot of offensive skill too. He put up a ton of points in junior. He wouldn't have gone first overall if he didn't. But they need someone to play that sort of Nazem Kadri role, and that's what Nugent Hopkins is doing, and that really limits his offensive upside. So this is a team where, yes, they need secondary scoring. They also need a ton of defensive help, and they could also use an upgrade in net. And so, as great as Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are, the whole reason I was fading them is because there is literally nothing else on this roster that I like or that I see as playoff caliber.
Kevin, you see any way they can fix things quickly in Edmonton to be a contender in the next couple of years?
Oh, well, I think 2 years it's plausible. Certainly not this year. There's a lot of free agents out there. Really what Holland will be tested on is his ability as a recruiter. I mean, this is almost like college football where he has to go out and be able to get someone. And there's going to be some interesting guys available, as we know, this summer. If they could bring, one of them in, obviously they've got to get, scores, and they have to get defensive help. And the problem is good defenders don't often go to free agency, but there is one this year. I think it's possible that Peter Angelo will end up in the free agent marketplace. I think he wants to sort of see what's out there. Who knows? Maybe the Blues can talk him into staying, but it would change everything for the Edmonton Oilers if they can land a player like that. Because everybody gets slotted a little differently because he comes in and he's the number one guy. That's almost never happens that you can bring in a number one defenseman. And when you do that, as we all know, that changes all three pairings usually, because a guy that was playing one goes to the second pairing, and the guy who was playing that second pairing goes to the third. So, if they could land somebody like that, then I would say within 2 years they could get there. I mean, let's not underestimate the impact of having two players who are among the top six, players in the league. Like, you could talk a lot about why the Penguins have been so strong for so long, but it begins and it starts with having Crosby and Malkin. And when you have those, I remember talking to Jim Rutherford last year, and he was talking to his coach. He said, Mike Sullivan, about some of the changes that were going to happen and who he was not going to be able to sign. And when it was all done, Rutherford told me Sullivan said to him, he says, "Do I still got Crosby and Malkin?" He goes, "Well, yeah, you do." And he says, "Well, then I'm not worried about the rest." And I think there's a lot to be said for that, if you start with that group. So that's why, I'm a believer that the Oilers can do it. But there's still, Sasha's right. I mean, there's so much work to be done. But I think it's baby steps for them. Get them into the playoffs now. And let's see what Connor McDavid and Draisaitl can do in the postseason. And you cross your fingers and hope the goalie gets hot and somebody plays above their head and see what happens. But it's certainly not this year. And I do think that they sort of owe it to the fans though to push. I wouldn't be an all-in Columbus Blue Jacket strategy. But I would be I'm going to be aggressive, and if I've got to give up a second and a third round pick to get a guy, I'm going to do it. That's how I would view it.
How worried would you be, Kevin, about the sort of detraction factor of Edmonton as a city? Because you think about Chris Pronger once upon a time, really wanted to and I don't have a sense of how unattractive it is as a destination. when you're weighing those sort of two factors against each other, the allure of playing with people as talented as McDavid and Draisaitl versus.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair question, and I think it's probably still out there for some players. But the lure of going to a team with Connor McDavid and Draisaitl is so strong, and the way one thing that the salary cap has changed is motivation of players, free agents in their free agency period. In the olden days, it was always about trying to identify, excuse me, a team that had a chance to win. But that's now become impossible. And you do the best you can to try to pick a winning organization. So that's shifted the emphasis for free agents to things like, the city, who the coach is, whether I know someone on the team, whether my buddies are there, what the travel's like, and so forth. And I think if you're searching around and you start to think, well, I'm going to be on the same team with Connor McDavid and Draisaitl, and what if I could get on their line? So I think the Oilers are far more attractive than they were. But Edmonton is still cold.
Yeah,
you're still plugging your car in, in the winter there, and Edmonton is still not New York, and it's still not Los Angeles. So it's not going to be easy to recruit them, but I think they have a couple of reasons to go there. And I don't underestimate Kenny Holland. He's a very nice guy.
Yeah.
He's around the league. Players will talk to players who played for him, and they'll say Ken Holland was, easy to deal with and so forth. So I think they're in better shape than they were before, although I don't think it's perfect.
Yeah, I could certainly foresee some free agents going there on a one-year deal, thinking, hey, if I go here for 1 year, play next to McDavid and or Draisaitl, put up some career numbers, and then I can sign somewhere else long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
As someone who's lived in Western Canada, I spent 4 years in Saskatoon. On my trips to Edmonton, what had always struck me about Edmonton in the winter is it was cold, because it's cold anywhere in the prairies in the winter. But for some reason, it was always gray and dreary there too. Maybe I just caught Edmonton in a bad cycle every time I went there. Maybe the sun does shine there, but I never witnessed it myself. And that was the one thing I always found about Saskatoon. Even though it was minus 40, it was blue skies and sunny every day, and that just somehow made it not tolerable. It was still minus 40. You still froze to death if you went outside, but seeing the sunshine and having blue skies just, I don't know, it just gave you a better feeling about the day. And I think minus 40 and gray skies, that would just have me walking off a ledge. Well, I actually read an interesting story on the sportsbettingdime.com website that I think would be intriguing to NHL bettors. It talked about the best teams to bet on to get the best return on your investment. And the top 5 teams, 4 of them are going to surprise you very much, but the 5th one might. And I think you guys can both pick it out when I read the list to you. Number 1, you had the New York Islanders. At number 2, the St. Louis Blues. Number 3, the Washington Capitals. Number 4, the New York Rangers. And then number 5, the Colorado Avalanche. Now, it just took me aback when I saw the Rangers in there at number 4, because I don't think when you're looking to bet on an NHL game, you're probably thinking, I got to get some money down on the Rangers. What is it that makes the Rangers such a good bet, Sasha?
They didn't have terribly high expectations coming into the year. They've won as underdogs is basically what has made them a good bet. They've won a few games that they really, really shouldn't have according to odds makers. So they were cashing tickets at very long odds on the road. And that's basically why their ROI, their sort of return on investment, is so high, even though their record is not particularly strong.
I think it's been their consistency too, Bob. They've been the same on the road essentially as they have been at home, and they've been competitive in both places, and they've been predictable. And as Sasha said, I think they've won. What are they, about 17 and 14, something like that? And I think that's better than anyone thought they were going to be. They were in the middle of an announced rebuild. Now they did go out and get Panarin. But their goalie, Georgiev, getting more playing time over Lundqvist, and they've kept the games close even when they've lost as well. So I was still surprised by that, but it's funny, but those 4 teams that you mentioned are 4 of the top 6 teams in the NHL. So it does show that the good teams are still a good bet. They can cover. But there's always going to be an outlier, a team that you didn't count on. That's the one you got to find. The Rangers being a little bit better than people thought, and the fact that they've their play level, their compete level, as the coaches like to call it, has been pretty consistent.
One number that jumped off the page at me when I was looking at these 5 teams, St. Louis, which has returned. If you say you bet $100 on a money line bet on every St. Louis game this year, you would be sitting with a $934 profit right now. That wasn't the number that shocked me, though, was it? They're 10-1-1 against the Central Division now. Kevin and I debated on Monday which was the better division between the Metro and the Central. But I mean, that's unbelievable numbers to put up again, the type of competition you're facing on a nightly basis in the Central. What does it make St. Louis so good?
Well, they're hard to play against for one. Berube, that's the change that I've noticed since Berube took over. Is that he has everyone playing, with pretty good intensity. And you go in there, and you're in for a game there. These guys are going at it start to finish, and I think that's been. And also, I think that the taste of winning last year. It has buoyed their confidence, to say the least. Like they play like champions now, and when you think back of where they were, the previous November, at the start of last season in the first 2 months, and then compare it to where they are, in the second half of last season and then this season. Even though they've had injuries this season, I think they're better because I just think they're a more confident team. And the knowledge that they gained on what it takes to be successful, I think really kind of makes a difference for this team. Those intangibles do show up, and they usually show up during the postseason. So, we may not even be seeing the Blues at their best. I think in the postseason you'll see them even turn it up higher, because I think not every team sort of realizes in the midst of their success, what's causing it, because some of them have so much talent. But I think the Blues do understand it. Like, I think the Blues knew, because they were so poor at various points last season, that the way they were successful was to play a certain way. And I think having that understanding makes them very dangerous, because not everybody understands, why they win. They just win, and then they sort of accept it. These Blues, I think they've dissected it a little bit and kind of understand, we got to play this way all the time if we want to be successful.
Yeah, their games feel like playoff games. In particular, their games within the division every night. And it might be a team that I'd be looking to fade just on a hunch in the playoffs in particular, because this is an incredibly long season. They went so deep into the playoffs last year. They've been playing sort of at a playoff level of intensity now for the last however many months that they've been on the ice, and that's something that's been incredibly hard to keep up, which is why it's so hard to repeat as Stanley Cup champions.
And another team that we shouldn't be surprised to see on that list certainly is the Capitals. But I remember at the start of the year, of course, when the season starts, all the sports books put out total wagers on total points for teams during the season, and there was a lot of sports books that were kind of down on the Caps and were anticipating that they would regress somewhat in terms of points this year. And I thought to myself at the start of the year, that's a really great bet, because I didn't expect Washington to have any kind of downturn at all. You still got Ovechkin firing on all cylinders. You still got a Vezina Trophy winner in Nat and Holtby. And, we didn't probably see John Carlson being as good as he's been this year, but that's another boost to them. And you've still got Backstrom. You've still got Kuznetsov. I mean, this is a great hockey team, and I didn't see them going south at all. And here they are right again, among the top teams in the NHL. Why would people, or Sasha, why would people have been down on the Caps at the start of the year? Was it just expecting that, the only direction they had to go was down?
I think the main reason why people were down on the Capitals is because they foresaw the rest of the Metro being incredibly strong. So when you look at sort of power ratings that odds makers and the like are creating, they're going to have teams such as Pittsburgh, such as Carolina, and even to some extent the New York Islanders, the Flyers, pretty high up the list. And so despite the fact that the Capitals have won, is it 4 or 5 straight division titles, the mere fact that they were surrounded by so many other teams that were at least in the top half, if not in the top 10 of the NHL, sort of had odds makers skewing to putting the Capitals a little farther down than what the everyday NHL observer would think heading into the year.
I also think, Bob, that some people thought Brian McClellan lost his mind last summer when he traded Matt Niskanen away. He's a good transition defenseman. He seemed to be perfect, for a team that has that kind of firepower up front. And, he brought back Gudas, who was a more physical player. And I don't think everyone trusted Jensen as well. I mean, after they got him from the Red Wings, they signed him to a long-term contract. And I had heard some rival general managers, suggest that they thought that move, was not a good one. When he traded away Niskanen, they thought the team would miss him. And, I think Brian McClellan's a kind of an underrated general manager. I think he's done a very good job since he replaced George McPhee there. And I think that move, I think he was smart like a fox. I think he sort of understood what this team needed. They needed a little change, and it took a little adjustment. Like I noticed at the start of the season, their defense didn't seem quite right. They had some injuries in there, and it didn't seem to be everyone didn't seem to be where they needed to be. But as time has gone on, and also, they lost Orpik last over 2, and even though he had slowed down and he wasn't as effective as he once was, he's still a terrific guy in the room and so forth. And I think there was thought that was going to be an issue as well. So I think that's why people were a little bit down on him or a little concerned that they may not be as strong. But that's turned out to be misplaced because they've been every bit as effective as they were the year they won the Stanley Cup.
One of my New Year's resolutions this year is to be a more positive person, but I wouldn't play this kind of wager, but isn't the best bet in the NHL just bet against the Red Wings?
Can you be positive and bet against one team all the time? I'm not sure. But it seems like a good bet. Although, you say that, and I watched them play an excellent game, and we all know that hot goaltending can overcome many issues. And that's what happened the last couple of games, even though they only won one of them. But Bernier looked terrific for the last 2 games. And this team is by far the worst team in the league. I don't think there's any question. But and again, I would argue that's exactly where Steve Yzerman wants it. I think if he didn't want it there, he would make other moves. He would have patched that defense together at the start of the year. I think he's as content to have this happen, and that's why they haven't made a move on the coach, because he knows they don't really have anything.
We're in the hall just past the holiday season, and 2 of the hockey traditions of the holiday season are, of course, the World Junior Tournament and recent years, the Winter Classic on New Year's Day. And I just wondered, from a betting standpoint, Sasha, how much interest is there in these 2 events over the holiday season?
So up in Canada, there's quite a bit of betting interest in the World Juniors. And you will see the odds skewed heavily in favor of the North American teams. Despite the United States having a pretty terrible track record, in particular when the tournament is held over in Europe. They just got bounced this morning by Finland. I'm sure are ruining a lot of tickets that were out there. The Winter Classic is not. It really depends on who's playing. There isn't a huge in betting interest. Just
Looks like we lost Sasha. Kevin, the Winter Classic. I know.
Still here?
You there, Sasha? We're losing you. Kevin, the Winter Classic, we debated it on Monday, the value of it. You still think it's a great item. I think Sasha's right. It depends on who's playing. I don't think there was a huge passionate interest beyond Nashville and Dallas.
Yeah, but I think if that's the case, that's enough. That's my only argument. Like, I understand what you're saying with regard to it being a spectacle on an international level. It does depend now on who it is and whether or not there's snow, and the novelty has worn off. But it's still a huge event in the cities it's held. And I looked yesterday at the coverage of that in Dallas, and it was an enormous event. And I think that's what you go for. I mean, and this is a good test for you and your positive attitude about this. You need to just think about this as the good fans in all the cities where they go, because it's going to be in Minnesota next year. They've never had it, and I guarantee you that will be one of the biggest things going in Minnesota. Imagine an outdoor hockey game in Minnesota where everybody grows up playing on the ponds and stuff. It'll be an amazing event. Now, will a bunch of people watch it on New Year's Day? Probably not. Minnesota has never been a very good draw. And particularly if they had Winnipeg as the opponent, which did they even announce yesterday who the opponent was?
No, they haven't said yet.
Yeah, well, if it's Winnipeg, I've also heard St. Louis. I think St. Louis would be a little better, but if it's Winnipeg, hardly anybody will watch. But that doesn't change the fact that these are major events in the cities they're held.
Well, one of the undercurrents to the World Junior, of course, is we're seeing many of the players that are expected to go high in the 2020 NHL entry draft, and in particular the guys that are kind of slotted at 1-2 right now, both playing for Canada, and Alexis Lafreniere and Quinton Byfield. And to me, this reminds me a lot of the McDavid-Eichel draft year. Jack Eichel is a fantastic player, a great, wonderful player to have on your team, but Connor McDavid's otherworldly, and I think you can say the same thing about Byfield. He'd be the Eichel in this argument, and certainly Lafreniere would be the McDavid. Do you see any way Lafreniere doesn't go number one overall, Kevin?
I don't. I think it is, but I don't. And I haven't seen him enough. Like, I think he's a very gifted player, but there's no Connor McDavid comparison from what I've seen from him. But he's going to be a great player. There's no doubt about it. And I'm sure that's the player, if the Red Wings could win the lottery, that they would take. I'm sure there'd be, just like was stated, there was disappointment in Buffalo when they didn't win the Connor McDavid sweepstakes. They ended up with a pretty good player in Jack Eichel. I think the same will be true with Byfield. It'll be one of those situations. You'll be disappointed, but you'll end up with still a very good player if you're number two.
There he is. Sasha, we were just debating about the number one overall. I mean, it seems like it's almost a certainty it'll be Lafreniere. Is Byfield equally as much of a lock to be number two at this point, do you think?
That's hard to say. I haven't watched enough of him to have a good sense of how far ahead he is. I think it's going to really sort of depend on team need at that point in time. If you're looking for a forward, that's probably who you're going to be going with. But if your needs are on the back end, if you're Edmonton, for instance, having another high draft pick, I think that you're not going to see a goalie taking that high not this year, but it could be a team need situation.
It seems like a lot like last year's draft, Kevin. There's no real defenseman that looks like they're going to be in the top 3 or 4 picks. So if you're a team that needs defense and you're high in the lottery, you're kind of out of luck. But
yeah, it seems like we're in kind of a down period for defensemen in terms of high yield defensemen. But the forwards have been great, so I don't think anybody's complaining. And from what I hear, everyone's pretty excited about it. And I know there's a goalie from Russia that some teams like as well, whose name I've now
Askarov.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the guy. And I've heard there's several teams that are interested in him. And, we'll see a goalie in the first round from what I hear. So, and maybe going, a little bit higher, maybe higher than Spencer Knight went. So if that's the case, that'll be a little bit different as well.
Do you think a good world tournament strengthens a draft pick's chances of going higher, Sasha, or is it so far ahead of the draft that it doesn't have a major impact?
Oh, no, I think it can have a huge impact. I think this tournament in the past has had very big impacts on certain players. Phil Kessel was certainly incredibly impressive. Alex Barkov really solidified his draft stock back when he was a 17-year-old playing for Finland with the full cage on. So absolutely, I think that scouts see this as a very valuable scouting opportunity.
Yeah, and I think it has a major impact because, the GMs all go to the World Junior Championship, and they're the ultimate decision makers, particularly in the first round. And, they're not likely to be in Moose Jaw on a Tuesday night looking at a prospect, but they're all going to go to Sweden or Switzerland in the World Junior Championship. So, when they're sitting around trying to decide what to do in the first round, their memories of that World Junior Championship are going to play a role. So I think it does have a pretty significant impact.
So I will say, though, also what I think probably has a bigger impact is seeing prospects who are able to play at the World Championships.
Sure, at the U18. Yeah. No, I would agree with that.
Playing with men, as they say. You think about Capo Caco last year playing for Finland, and I think he did. He gave his draft stock a huge boost by playing so well at the World Championships, and then was sort of rivaling Jack Hughes to be the number one overall pick. Didn't go number one, but I think that's sort of what had him entrenched in that conversation, is how well he.
All right, gentlemen. Well, we've once again used up all of our time. Thank everyone for joining us. Thanks to Sasha and Kevin for their always insightful expertise. And we'll be back with you next week. This has been the HockeyDebates.com podcast. And you have yourself a great day.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Sasha. See you, Bob.